A crying baby, a luxury mansion, and a secret so dark it was literally eating the child alive. What a humble housekeeper discovered under a designer mattress would expose the ugly truth behind one family's perfect facade and prove that sometimes the poorest person in the room has the richest heart. Before we begin, if this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because kindness matters, and your support helps us share more stories like this one. There are some sounds that cut straight through to your soul. A baby's cry is one of them. But this was different. This wasn't the normal fussing of a newborn wanting milk or a clean diaper. This was the sound of pure suffering, and it echoed through the halls of one of the most beautiful mansions in all of France. Let me take you there. Picture this. The French countryside in the spring of 2024. Rolling green hills, lavender fields stretching toward the horizon, and perched on top of a gentle slope, the Laurent estate. This wasn't just a house. It was a masterpiece. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. Crystal chandeliers in every room, each one worth more than most people earn in a year. Paintings on the walls that belonged in museums. Gardens that looked like they'd been painted by Monet himself. And inside this palace lived the Laurents. Philippe Laurent, a wealthy investment banker with silver hair and suits that cost thousands. His wife, Isabelle, former fashion model, always draped in designer silk, always perfectly put together. To anyone looking from the outside, they had everything. Money, status, beauty, power, and now a baby. Little Theo Laurent, just 3 weeks old. But something was very, very wrong. That's where our real story begins. With a woman named Amélie Dubois. Amélie was 32 years old, with kind brown eyes and hands that were always busy. She'd grown up in a tiny village in Provence, the daughter of a baker. She knew what it meant to work hard, to stretch every euro, to find joy in simple things. 7 months ago, she'd taken a job at the Laurent estate as a housekeeper. She needed the money. Her mother back home was sick, and the medical bills were piling up. So Amélie scrubbed those marble floors. She polished those crystal chandeliers. She folded designer clothes and made beds with sheets that cost more than her monthly salary. And she never complained. That wasn't who she was. Amélie believed in doing your work with dignity, with care, with kindness, no matter who you were working for. But then baby Theo came home from the hospital. And everything changed. It started the very first night. 3 in the morning, Amélie woke to the sound of screaming. Not crying. Screaming. She rushed out of her small room in the staff quarters. Tucked away at the back of the mansion, nothing like the grand bedrooms upstairs, and found Isabelle standing in the hallway in her silk nightgown, her perfect hair messy for once, her face tight with exhaustion. "The baby," Isabelle said, her voice sharp. "He won't stop. Can you do something?" Amélie nodded and went into the nursery. Oh, the nursery. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Pale blue walls hand-painted with little clouds and stars. A massive crib made of polished oak, imported from Italy. Toys that probably cost more than Amélie's entire childhood. Everything perfect. Everything expensive. And in the middle of it all, tiny Theo, his face red and purple, his little body thrashing, screaming like his heart was breaking. Amélie lifted him gently, carefully, her experienced hands cradling his small head. She'd helped raise her younger siblings back home. She knew babies. She knew how to hold them, how to soothe them. "Shoo, little one," she whispered in French, rocking him gently. "Shoo, I'm here. You're safe." And here's the strange thing. Theo started to calm down. His screams became whimpers. His tiny fists unclenched. He nestled against Amélie's shoulder, his breathing slowing. Isabelle watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. "He likes you," she said, and there was something bitter in her voice. Maybe jealousy. Maybe relief. The nannies, they couldn't do that. "Nannies?" Amélie asked softly, still rocking Theo. "We've had 3. In 3 weeks." Isabelle's perfect facade cracked just a little. "They all quit. Said he was impossible. Said he screamed too much. The doctors say it's colic. That some babies just cry more." Amélie looked down at the baby in her arms. His eyes were closing now, his little mouth relaxing. "He's quiet now," she said. "Then put him down," Isabelle said. "I need sleep. Philippe has an important meeting tomorrow, and he's already furious about the noise." Amélie walked slowly to the beautiful Italian crib. She lowered Theo gently, so gently, onto the pristine white sheets. And the very moment, his back touched that mattress, Theo's eyes shot open and he began to scream again. Louder than before. Desperate. Terrified, Amelie's heart clenched. See? Isabel snapped. Impossible. Just do whatever you can. I'm going back to bed. And she left, closing the door behind her. Amelie stood there in the soft glow of the night light, listening to Theo scream, and something in her gut told her this wasn't normal. This wasn't colic. This was something else. This happened every single night for a week. Every night at 3 a.m, Amelie would be woken by Theo's cries. Every night she'd go to the nursery, lift him up, and he'd calm in her arms. And every night, the moment she laid him back in that expensive crib, the screaming would start again. She tried everything. Different swaddles. Different positions. Singing lullabies her mother used to sing. Nothing worked. The pattern was always the same. Calm in her arms, screaming in the crib. On the 7th night, Amelie made a decision. It was midnight. Theo had been crying for an hour straight. Philippe had already banged on her door twice, demanding she fix the situation. Isabel had dissolved into tears in the hallway, saying she couldn't take it anymore. Amelie went into the nursery, closed the door, and locked it. She lifted Theo carefully, holding him against her chest. And this time she really looked at him. She turned him gently, examining his tiny body in the soft light. That's when she saw them. Red marks. Small welts along his back, his shoulders, even on his little legs. They looked angry, irritated, almost like Amelie's breath caught, almost like bites. Her hands trembled as she laid Theo on the changing table. He whimpered but didn't scream when he was off the mattress. She stepped closer to the crib, her heart pounding. The sheets were fresh. She'd changed them herself that morning. But as she pressed her hand down on the mattress, she felt something wrong. A dampness. A strange give that shouldn't be there. And a smell. Faint but there. Like something rotting. Amelie's stomach turned. She glanced back at Theo, at those red marks on his precious skin. She looked at the crib, at the expensive Italian mattress that was supposed to be the best money could buy. And she reached down and lifted the corner of the fitted sheet. What she saw in that moment would haunt her forever. At first, her brain couldn't process it. Shadows, she thought. Just shadows in the dim light. But then her eyes adjusted, and she realized the mattress was moving. Writhing. Alive. Thousands, no, tens of thousands of maggots. Pale, wriggling, crawling over each other in a grotesque dance. The padding of the mattress had turned black, rotting, decomposing from the inside out. There were dark patches of mold. Dead insects. And the smell. Oh God, the smell that rose up when she pulled back that sheet. Amelie stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. This baby, this innocent, helpless baby had been sleeping, had been placed by his own parents, on a mattress full of decay and insects and rot. Those marks on his back weren't a rash. They were bites. From the maggots. From whatever else was living in that filth. Every night, Theo had been laid down on this. Every night, he'd been tortured by creatures crawling across his soft skin. And everyone, the parents, the doctors, the nannies, everyone had dismissed his screams as colic. Tears streamed down Amelie's face as the full horror of it crashed over her. She grabbed her phone from her apron pocket with shaking hands and took photos. The mattress. The infestation. Theo's back. Evidence. She needed evidence. Then she scooped Theo up, holding his naked little body protectively against her chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat racing against hers. Never again, she whispered fiercely, her voice breaking. I promise you, little one. Never again. She turned toward the door, ready to march straight to Isabel and Philippe, ready to demand answers, ready to and froze. Because standing in the doorway, her face pale as death in the dim light, was Isabel Laurent. And from the expression on her face, the guilt, the shame, the fear, Amelie realized something that made her blood run cold. Isabel knew. She had always known something was wrong. And she'd done nothing. Have you ever seen someone's entire world collapse in a single moment? That's what Amelie witnessed as she stood there in that nursery, holding baby Theo against her chest, staring at Isabel Laurent in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was Theo's soft whimpering and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then Isabel's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Put him down. 3 words. Cold. Controlled. But Amelie could hear the tremor underneath. The fear. No, Amelie said quietly. She held Theo tighter, her hand protectively cradling his small head. Not until you look at what your son has been sleeping on. I don't need to. Look at it. Amelie's voice rose, surprising even herself. She'd never spoken to Isabel like this. Never raised her voice in this house. But this was different. This was a child's life. Isabel's perfectly manicured hands clenched at her sides. Her silk nightgown shimmered in the low light as she took one reluctant step into the nursery, then another. Her eyes traveled to the crib, to the corner where Amélie had pulled back the sheet. And Amélie watched as the color drained completely from Isabel's face. "Mon Dieu," Isabel whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The maggots continued their grotesque crawling, unbothered by the human drama unfolding above them. In the soft glow of the night light, you could see everything. The black rot spreading through the expensive padding. The writhing mass of larvae. The decomposition that had been festering beneath their designer sheets for weeks. "He's been sleeping on this," Amélie said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Every single night. This is why he screams. Look at his back." She turned slightly, so Isabel could see the red welts covering Theo's tiny body. Bite marks. Evidence of suffering that had been ignored, dismissed, explained away. Isabel's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto the upholstered rocking chair in the corner, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, Amélie thought she was crying. But when Isabel looked up, her eyes were dry. Just empty. "I didn't know it was this bad," Isabel whispered. "But you knew something was wrong," Amélie said. It wasn't a question. The silence that followed was answer enough. Amélie's mind was racing, pieces clicking together like a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. "This mattress," she said slowly. "When did you buy it?" Isabel wouldn't meet her eyes. "Mrs. Laurent," Amélie pressed. "When did you buy this mattress?" "We didn't." The voice came from the doorway, and both women turned to see Philippe Laurent standing there in his silk pajamas, his silver hair disheveled, his face hard as stone. Not exactly. He walked into the room with the confidence of a man used to controlling every situation. But Amélie noticed his eyes carefully avoided the crib. "What does that mean?" "Not exactly," Amélie demanded. Philippe's jaw tightened. "It means we bought it secondhand. From an estate sale. Slightly used, but in perfect condition. Or so we were told." The words hung in the air like poison. Amélie couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You live in a mansion worth millions of euros. You have 12 luxury cars in your garage. I've polished chandeliers in this house that cost more than most people's homes. And you bought a used mattress, a rotting, infested used mattress, for your newborn son? Watch your tone," Philippe snapped. "You're the help. I'm a human being." Amélie's voice cracked. "And right now, I'm the only person in this house who seems to care that this baby has been tortured every single night. Tortured is a strong word. Look at him." Amélie held Theo up slightly, his small body visible in the light, the welts angry and red against his pale skin. "These are bites. From the maggots. From whatever else is living in that filth. He's 3 weeks old, and he's been in agony because you wanted to save a few €100. Philippe's face went purple with rage, but before he could speak, Isabel's broken voice cut through. It wasn't about saving money. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring at her hands, twisted in her lap. Or maybe it was. I don't know anymore. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "When I was pregnant, Philippe kept talking about expenses. About how much everything cost. The renovation of the nursery alone was €50,000. The furniture, the clothes, She trailed off, tears finally starting to fall. "He said we needed to be smart. To not waste money on things no one would see." "No one would see?" Amélie repeated, incredulous. "The mattress is inside the crib," Philippe said defensively. "Covered by sheets. No one looks at it." It seemed logical. A friend was selling furniture from his country house. There'd been some water damage from a pipe leak, but he said everything was fine, dried out, good as new. The mattress looked perfect on the outside. Cost us €300 instead of 1,500. And there it was. The truth, ugly and undeniable. Here was the plot twist that no one could have expected. The Laurents, with all their wealth and status and designer everything, had gambled with their son's safety over a few €100. Not because they were poor. Not because they had no choice. But because they could. Because the mattress was hidden. Because no one would know. Because they cared more about appearances than about what was underneath. "That pipe leak," Amélie said quietly, the pieces all falling into place now. "The water damage. It got into the mattress, didn't it? Created the perfect breeding ground. Mold. Rot. Decay. And then the insects came." Philippe said nothing. "How long have you known?" Amélie asked, looking between them. When did you realize? Isabel's tears were flowing freely now. I didn't know about the maggots. I swear I didn't. But a week ago, I noticed a smell. Just faint. I thought maybe it was a dirty diaper, or... I told myself it was nothing. And the crying, her voice broke. Everyone said it was colic. The pediatrician, my mother, the books. They all said some babies just cry more. I was so tired. The birth was difficult, and Philippe was always at work, and I wanted to believe them. You wanted to believe, Amélie repeated softly, because the truth was too uncomfortable. Isabel flinched as if she'd been slapped. And you, Amélie turned to Philippe. You never once checked on what you'd bought? Never thought to examine something your newborn son would be sleeping on for hours every day? Philippe's expression was stone. I trusted my friend. He's a respected businessman. He wouldn't. He sold you a contaminated mattress, Amélie interrupted. Either he didn't know and was careless, or he did know and was cruel. Either way, you didn't verify. You didn't check. You just assumed. The silence in that nursery was deafening. Theo had fallen asleep against Amélie's shoulder, finally, blessedly peaceful in her arms, away from the nightmare he'd been forced to endure. Amélie looked at these two wealthy, powerful people who had everything anyone could want, and she felt something shift inside her. Not just anger anymore. Something deeper. Sadness, disappointment, and a fierce, protective love for the tiny life she held. I have photos, she said quietly, holding up her phone. Of the mattress. Of his bites. Time-stamped. Documented. Philippe's eyes narrowed. What are you planning to do with those? That depends on you, Amélie said. She walked toward the door, past both of them, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Right now, I'm taking Theo to my room. He's going to sleep somewhere clean, somewhere safe. And tomorrow morning, we're going to have a conversation about what happens next. You can't just take our son, Philippe started. Watch me, Amélie said, her voice like iron. And if you try to stop me, if you try to fire me, if you try to intimidate me or threaten me, these photos go to child services. Tonight. Do you understand? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked down the grand hallway, past the expensive paintings and crystal chandeliers, past the marble and gold and all the beautiful things that meant absolutely nothing. She carried Theo to her small room in the staff quarters. Just a simple space with a single bed, a wooden dresser, and a window that looked out over the gardens. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. But it was clean. It was safe. It was full of love. Amélie laid Theo gently on her bed, surrounding him with soft towels and pillows so he couldn't roll. She created a little nest, warm and protected. And then she sat beside him, her hand resting on his tiny chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. For the first time since he'd come home from the hospital, baby Theo Laurent slept peacefully through the night. And Amélie stayed awake, watching over him, this little one who'd been failed by everyone who should have protected him. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly across the French sky. The lavender fields swayed in the night breeze. And inside the Laurent mansion, 3 people faced a truth that all their money couldn't hide. Sometimes the poorest person in the room has the richest heart. And sometimes kindness is the only currency that truly matters. Dawn breaks differently when you've spent the whole night protecting a life. Amélie watched the first golden rays of sunlight creep across the floor of her small room, painting everything in shades of amber and hope. She hadn't slept. Not even for a moment. She'd sat beside Theo all night, her hand on his chest, feeling each precious breath, watching his little face finally relaxed in genuine peace. No screaming. No thrashing. No terror. Just sleep. The way a baby should sleep. But Amélie knew this moment of peace was fragile. She knew that when the sun fully rose, when Philippe and Isabel woke up, there would be a reckoning. And she had no idea what form it would take. She didn't have to wait long to find out. At 6:30 in the morning, her door flew open so hard it hit the wall. Philippe Laurent stood there, already dressed in one of his expensive suits, his silver hair perfectly styled, his face twisted with fury. But there was something else there too, something Amélie hadn't seen before, fear. Not of her. Fear of losing control. How dare you, he hissed, keeping his voice low but venomous. How dare you take my son without permission? You're fired. Pack your things and get out of my house. Now. Amélie stood slowly, carefully positioning herself between Philippe and the bed where Theo still slept. She was a full head shorter than Philippe, wearing yesterday's wrinkled uniform, her hair messy from the sleepless night. By every measure of what the world values, money, power, status, she should have been powerless against him. But she wasn't powerless. Because she had something Philippe didn't. The absolute moral certainty that she was doing the right thing. No, she said quietly. Philippe's face went red. Excuse me? I said no. Amelie's voice was calm, steady. I'm not leaving. And neither is Theo. Not until I know he's safe. You're a housekeeper from some tiny village, Philippe spat. You have no authority here. No rights. You think anyone will believe you over us? Over a family like the Lawrence? We have lawyers, connections, influence. And I have the truth, Amelie interrupted, pulling out her phone. Time-stamped photos of a mattress full of maggots. Medical evidence of bite marks on a 3-week-old baby. Documentation of 3 nannies who quit because they couldn't handle his colic. A paper trail that shows exactly what you bought, when you bought it, and how little you paid. She took a step forward, and Philippe actually took a step back. So here's what's going to happen, Amelie said. You're going to listen to what I have to say. And then you're going to make a choice about what kind of father you want to be. You can't talk to me like. Look at him. Amelie's voice rose, and she gestured to the bed where Theo lay sleeping peacefully. When is the last time you saw your son sleep like that? When is the last time he wasn't screaming in pain? Philippe's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Theo, really looked, and something in his face cracked. Behind him, Isabelle appeared in the doorway. She was still in her nightgown, her face swollen from crying, her perfect composure completely shattered. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Philippe, she whispered. Look at him. He's actually sleeping. The 3 of them stood there in that small room as the morning light grew stronger. And in that moment, something shifted. Philippe's shoulders sagged. The fury drained from his face, replaced by something raw and terrible, shame. I didn't know, he said, his voice barely audible. I thought the doctor was right. I thought it was just colic. I thought. You didn't think, Amelie said, but her voice was gentler now. You didn't look. You were too busy with your work, your meetings, your image. And you, she turned to Isabelle, you were too tired, too overwhelmed, too afraid to challenge him. So you both convinced yourselves everything was fine, that the crying would stop, that it wasn't your fault. Isabelle's tears started again, but this time she didn't hide them. What kind of mother am I? She whispered. What kind of mother lets her baby suffer like that? And here's where the story could have gone dark. Where Amelie could have judged them, condemned them, used her power to destroy them. She had every right. They had failed their son in the worst possible way. But Amelie had grown up in a small village where people believed in second chances. Where kindness wasn't just something you showed to people who deserved it. It was something you showed to people who needed it most. She took a deep breath. You're not bad people, she said quietly. You're just lost. You've built this whole life around money and status and appearances, and somewhere along the way, you forgot what actually matters. Philippe looked at her, and for the first time, she saw him without his armor. Just a man. Flawed. Scared. Human. Tell me what to do, he said. Please. Amelie walked to the window, looking out at the beautiful grounds of the estate. The manicured gardens. The fountain. The perfection of it all. First, she said, you burn that mattress. Today. You don't throw it away. You destroy it completely. No evidence that it ever existed in this house. Philippe nodded. Second, you take Theo to a real pediatrician. Not the one who dismissed his pain. Someone who will actually examine those bite marks and treat them properly. Yes, Isabelle whispered. Third, Amelie turned to face them both. You decide what kind of parents you want to be. Not perfect parents. Nobody's perfect. But present parents. Parents who check things. Who question things. Who put their child's well-being above their pride. The room fell silent except for Theo's soft breathing. Then Philippe did something Amelie never expected. He sank down onto the edge of her bed, this man in his 1,000-euro suit sitting on her simple cotton sheets, and he buried his face in his hands. I almost lost him, he said, his voice breaking. My son. I almost, because I was too cheap, too proud, too, he couldn't finish. Isabelle moved to sit beside him, and for the first time, Amelie saw them not as her wealthy employers, but as what they really were, 2 broken people trying to find their way. You didn't lose him, Amelie said softly. He's right here, and you have a chance to do better. To be better. Philippe looked up at her with red eyes. Will you stay? Please. We'll pay you more, give you better quarters, anything. I don't want more money, Amelie interrupted. And I don't need better quarters. This room is just fine. Then what do you want? Isabel asked. Amelie looked at Theo, at this tiny perfect life who had no idea how close he'd come to tragedy. I want to stay as his protector. Not as a nanny, not as a housekeeper. As someone who has actual authority to speak up if I ever see anything that puts him at risk. As someone you'll listen to, truly listen to, even when it's uncomfortable. She pulled out her phone, holding it up. And these photos? I'll keep them. Not to blackmail you. Not to hurt you. But as a reminder. For all of us. Of what happens when we choose appearances over truth. Philippe and Isabel looked at each other, having a silent conversation with their eyes. Then they both nodded. Agreed, Philippe said. Anything. Everything. Just help us. Please. And that's when Amelie made the choice that defined everything that came after. She could have held on to her anger. Could have made them grovel. Could have used her power to punish them. Instead, she chose kindness. Okay, she said simply. We start now. New mattress. New everything for the nursery. You're going to check every single item personally. And from now on, when Theo cries, you come to him. Both of you. Not me. You. Over the next weeks, something remarkable happened at the Laurent estate. The old mattress was burned in the garden, Philippe himself lighting the match, Isabel standing beside him with tears streaming down her face. A new organic mattress arrived, but only after Philippe had researched every detail, read every review, verified every certification. Theo's bite marks were treated by a pediatric dermatologist who was horrified by what she saw and documented everything carefully. Within a week, the welts began to fade. Within 2 weeks, they were gone. But the real change was deeper. Philippe started coming home earlier. Not every night, his work was still demanding, but 3-4 nights a week, he'd arrive at 7 instead of midnight. He'd go straight to the nursery, pick up Theo, and just hold him. Learning his son's face, his sounds, his tiny personality. Isabel joined a support group for new mothers. She started being honest about her struggles instead of pretending everything was perfect. She learned to ask for help. And Theo? Theo thrived. He started sleeping through the night. His cries became normal baby cries, for milk, for attention, for comfort, not screams of agony. He smiled. He cooed. He became what he was always meant to be, a happy, healthy baby. Amelie watched all of this unfold from her small room in the staff quarters. She'd been given a raise, which she sent home to her mother, and a new title, Family Care Coordinator. But to her, nothing had really changed. She was still just Amelie, doing what she'd always done, caring for others with her whole heart. One evening, 3 months after that terrible night, Amelie was in the kitchen preparing Theo's bottle when Isabel came in. She sat down at the kitchen table, watching Amelie work. I need to tell you something, Isabel said quietly. Amelie turned, concerned. Is everything all right? More than all right, Isabel said. I need you to know that you saved more than Theo that night. You saved all of us. You saved our family. Amelie felt her eyes grow hot with tears. You saved yourselves. I just refused to look away. Exactly, Isabel said. And that's everything. In a world where it's so easy to ignore what's uncomfortable, to pretend everything's fine, you chose to see. To care. To fight for someone who couldn't fight for themselves. She reached across the table and took Amelie's hand. You could have destroyed us. Could have gone to the press, ruined our reputation, taken us down. And you had every right to. But instead, you gave us grace. You showed us kindness we didn't deserve. Why? Amelie thought about her village back home. About her mother who'd always said that the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they gave. About the way simple people with simple means had shown her more love than all the wealth in the world could buy. Because everyone deserves a second chance, Amelie said. And because Theo needed his parents. Not perfect parents. Just present ones. That night, as Amelie stood in the nursery watching Theo sleep peacefully in his safe, clean crib, she thought about how strange life could be. How the path to this moment had been paved with horror and pain, but had led to healing. How sometimes the darkest discoveries could light the way to the brightest transformations. Philippe appeared in the doorway, home early again, loosening his tie. Thank you, he said simply. For everything. Amelie smiled. He's your son. Loving him isn't something to thank me for. It's just what we do. As the sun set over the lavender fields, painting the French countryside in shades of purple and gold, 3 people stood in that nursery watching a baby sleep. A wealthy banker who'd learned that money couldn't buy conscience. a former model who'd discovered that perfection wasn't the goal, presence was, and a housekeeper from a tiny village who'd proven that the most powerful force in the world wasn't wealth or status. It was kindness, the courage to see what others ignored, the strength to speak what others silenced, the grace to offer second chances when judgment would be easier. Because in the end, that's what changes the world. Not money, not power, not perfection. Just one person who refuses to look away. One person who chooses love over indifference. One person who believes that every life, no matter how small, matters infinitely. And sometimes that one person is exactly who you'd least expect. A humble housekeeper in a crisp uniform, with the richest heart money could never buy. If Amelie's courage moved your heart today, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button right now. Let's spread this message of kindness to everyone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because we share stories that matter, stories that remind us what it means to be truly human. And here's my question for you. What would you have done in Amelie's place? Would you have had the courage to stand up? Would you have chosen kindness over revenge? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and your voice matters. Remember this. Wealth means nothing without compassion. Status means nothing without conscience. And sometimes the person with the least has the most to give. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And never forget, your kindness could save a life. See you in the next story. Red Heart.